Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for sticking with us this long in the day. We appreciate your being here. I want to first introduce our esteemed panel here, and then I will take only a couple of minutes in order to introduce this topic of collaboration. We've got Jennifer Daniels of Colgate-Palmolive, who's next. So we've got Sandra Goldstein of Cravath. We've got Barbara Becker of Gibson Dunn, and we've got who have got on the end? Faith, there we are, Faith Gay of Quinn, Emanuel. So we are absolutely thrilled to have a panel like this put together. And yes, we will address that diversity topic at some point along the way here today. But I feel like I should admit that collaboration has become something of a buzzword these days. There's a lot of hype about it. And as Scott said, I've been researching this topic of collaboration in professional service firms at Harvard for a number of years now. And we try to move beyond the hype in a couple of ways. We look at collaboration as a means to an end, and the end is better client service. And we think that there are a couple of trends that are pushing collaboration to the forefront. It's not just the kumbaya factor here. It is that lawyers, like other kinds of knowledge workers, be it scientists or physicians, have got to become more and more specialized in order to claim expertise over a domain, while at the same time, clients' problems have gotten more and more complex. And the only way to resolve this dilemma of narrow expertise and broad problems is to have specialists combine their expertise in order to solve these very sophisticated problems. And that's what we mean by collaboration. That's what we're talking about here today. So I thought we would start with Jennifer and just ask, do clients care?
Okay, so I don't think I can speak for all clients in the world, but I certainly can speak for myself, and I certainly think I can speak generally for general counsels of complex organizations and complex global organizations. So I think of two things when I think of whether collaboration matters. The short answer is yes, it does, and why. The reason is, I guess they're twofold. One thing that I have to do every day is manage complexity. Colgate is a huge business. We're in 200 countries. We are regulated in various ways all around those 200 countries. So every problem I have is usually multidimensional. So I am thinking about how do I manage the complexity in solving that problem in, second point, the most efficient way. So managing complexity and being efficient are the two things that are at the top of my mind all the time. And when I think of a problem, I think I have various resources I can bring to bear to solve that problem. I can bring my own internal resources to bear to solve that problem. More often than not, I might have to supplement those with outside resources. Sometimes those are generalist outside resources. Sometimes they're specialist outside resources. But the most productive way and efficient way to solve a very complex problem I've found is when you have a team collaborating that frankly includes not only collaborating outside counsel, meaning the firm itself is collaborating within itself to solve the problem, but frankly, deep collaboration with my in-house team and also with the business team so that everybody understands the problem, because they're all business problems when push comes to shove. None of them are really legal problems. All of the legal problems I have stem from business. And having those teams have all those people involved and engaged together collaborating, we definitely get to a better result than if it is a bunch of specialists each doing their piece of the problem.
So picking up on this idea of understanding the business, I know, Faith, we had a chat earlier about what it takes in order to get lawyers to step away from the pressing day-to-day, the pressures of that, and be able to take time to understand, what you call the DNA of the client. How do you think about that?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on how a firm is structured. My strong view is the days of origination credit ought to be over in all outside law firms, because they tend to divide people. They also tend to never be administered the way people want them to be. They are a distractor for in 80% of the time or more. It seems to me you either go to lockstep if you have a firm that has that culture that works, or you go to the opposite, and which is what we have, which is something softer, which takes into account generation, and we're a pure litigation firm, so trial performance, working with others, creating new ideas within the firm, new practice areas. And so I think with those kinds of things that are assessed within the firm, and I have every one of the partners who works with me each quarter write and tell me who has worked well with them in the firm, whether they're associates, counsel, contract attorneys, or other partners, and who hasn't, just to sort of, we encourage the idea of collaboration as the first among equals in terms of the indicia of rewarding people financially. I think in terms of getting into the DNA of clients, part of it is to let people work on what they want to work on. If someone is fascinated with pharma, we encourage that depth of expertise. It is natural, I think, to want to cleave to one industry or another, or a variety, a small variety of industries, because that's what excites you intellectually, and we try to encourage that as much as we can. And to Jennifer's point, I think it's much more intellectually interesting, both inside and outside, to have a combined team of inside and outside, rather than just floating, trying to figure out what the client thinks and hope you get it right, or just taking care of the problem for them. It's much more exciting to understand what their perspective is as well, because it is a profoundly different job to be inside our corporation than to be outside.
That's true.
And picking up on what Faith was saying about structure of the firm, we are 100% lockstep at Cravath, and I could say it is 100% in our personal interest to make sure that we're giving the client the best product. And so I agree, the structure is hugely important, and whether that's litigation, working with tax, or working with trust and estates, or corporate, or whether frankly within litigation itself, you don't have the origination credit issue, and it's, at the end of the day, we are all benefited if there's a better product for the client. And I don't just mean at the beginning of a matter, who agrees to work on it. It's those 3 a.m. I had to call somebody at 3 a.m. in Hurricane Sandy because it was this emergency and something needed to be done, and we needed a partner to come in and do the work until what turned out to be basically 3 a.m. the next day, for something to go to the other side's board in a deal context, and people respond. And I don't think, and that obviously all inures to the benefit of the client, I don't think a structure that's kind of eat what you kill is going to produce that result. So I think it's hugely important to make sure you put in systems that are going to incent everybody to do what's right for the client, because it's ultimately going to be right for you as well.
I agree. I think that our system at Gibson Dunn is a modified lockstep, and I think without a culture that supports collaboration, it's, the client knows. I think that you could tell on first meeting what type of system is being brought to bear. And as I joked before we got on stage, I'm a corporate lawyer. If I'm answering an ERISA question, that's a bad idea, right? And you can tell that I should be calling on my ERISA partner. I shouldn't be answering that. But I think part of what goes to the culture of collaboration is, to what extent can you rely on your partners? And to what extent are the partners there to help you out? And are they going to respond to you? Because it's one thing to have brilliant partners and colleagues, but it's another thing to have them that will actually return your call and email when you have a client calling you. And I think culture of responsiveness and that values partners helping, regardless of origination or whatever credit you're getting on a particular matter, is critical to having a successful and collaborative environment. I'm the sole corporate lawyer up here, and every day, at every part of my job is to deliver all of the resources to our clients to get a deal done. I can't do that deal by myself. I need my tax, antitrust, employment, IP, et cetera, lawyers at the firm to deliver that product to the client. I think where it gets more challenging is when you do have a complex client, a multinational, and you have multi-offices, and you have FCPA lawyers doing investigations and litigators and you have disclosure lawyers, and you have to make sure your disclosure lawyers know what the litigators are doing because that impacts your disclosure. And how, as a partner, do you make sure, as a relationship partner, that you have your hands around all of the different aspects of what the firm is doing for that client? And in our case, we have 18 offices, really making sure that I take the time to check in with my colleagues, know who's doing work for the client. I feel like it is my commitment to my clients as a relationship partner to really spend that time, gather that information from my partners, make sure they have the information about a new general counsel, a new issue, or whatever, so that we can really deliver the best service to our clients.
So Barbara's just been picking up on some of the ways that individual partners can enhance collaboration in their firms, because clearly, as Faith was saying, the systems, the structures, the processes in the firm influence people's behaviors, and yet regardless of the processes in place, what we find in our research is that there's wide variance in every single firm. And so in these firms that we study, every single one of them has partners that are practically lone wolves, and in the same firm, under the same remuneration system, the same culture, the same everything else, there are partners who are highly, highly collaborative. And so people do have choices to make here. And I'd be interested, Faith and Sandra, if you have ideas for what it takes to enhance collaboration at the individual level, the interpersonal level.
Well, I mean, I would just say, I don't think that in the disruptive environment we're in now in the law firm world, I don't think there are going to be firms that survive if they're not collaborative. I mean, the idea that a partner would not answer an email, or an associate, or anyone, I cannot imagine that is an acceptable business practice in the early 21st century. It really is quite foreign to me. But I think in terms of encouraging the individuals, I mean, I find it actually easier with the younger generation, which whoever says that. But I think our millennials who are coming into our firms now are used to being communal, and they want to be, partly because they're lonely because they've been on the internet too much, and they want to, and they also, their parents actually spent time with them, and so they have an expectation that as an adult you would spend time with them. This is the first generation where my young associates have chased me down the hall saying, "You took out that paragraph and it was brilliant. Why did you do that? It used to be, okay, Faith, it's fine." And it took me a moment to get used to that. But I think there's something that we can learn about the way our young associates and who are coming up through the ranks do business. They are not siloed. They think it's intellectually boring. They want to be together. They want to think out of the box. And so we've been doing a lot of forcing the 55-year-olds to spend time with the 25 and 30-year-olds. And at first they were like, what do we have to learn from these people? We're the craft masters. But I think that we've learned a lot from the way they are doing business or want to do business.
Well, picking up on the associate theme, I do think how firms structure themselves in terms of teaching their associates from day one has a lot to do with this. So for example, we work in teams. So associates work in teams and are assigned to a partner for a period of time. And so they get used to working in teams and working collaboratively. I think that helps a lot. I think also, you were mentioning that we have so many offices, it's difficult. That is, I could see that. I mean, one of the benefits we're in one building. And so it's easier to get into a conference room and talk about, as a group of, corporate litigation, just everybody together in a conference room. It's a lot easier to do that and keep in touch and have your weekly or whatever it is meetings than all over the place. But I could see that. I could easily see that being
and
a
one
challenge.
of our challenges, I think, is because we have 12 or 1,300 lawyers spread across the world, is really knowing the expertise of all of your colleagues around the world, so that when I'm speaking to a client and she raises the issue du jour, I can say, our guy in London or our guy in Singapore has just came out of the regulatory authority that's looked into this issue. Let me put you in touch, see if he can help. And so it is a real challenge. I think one of the things that helps the young associates is to see the partners model the good behavior. So if the associates are asking, has anybody seen a case on this? If you actually respond to that and help that associate, and your associates sitting in your office see that you're helping a second year in Munich on some issue, then it might encourage them to be equally as responsive when the partner asks on a Saturday evening if anybody can turn a document or whatever. But I do think that being responsive yourself and being willing to step in, answer one-off questions from your colleagues around the world, no matter what level of seniority, no matter how busy you are, goes a long way to creating that spirit amongst your colleagues who are seeing you every day.
I think it comes down to being a great team leader and frankly being a great coach. So I've had a number of circumstances, frankly, with a number of the firms represented up here where I've actually brought multiple firms together on a team. Where we've been handling a complex litigation where we needed various expertise. And I've always tried to think of myself in that role as a bit of a coach, as a bit of the person who's helping people, who would even reach out to associates at the law firms and try to bring them along a little bit as the client. I mean, assuming the firm is willing to let me do that. So I do think being a great coach and being very clear with your team about what you're trying to accomplish. I think goal setting and telling people this is what we're trying to do, this is why we're trying to do it, this is how it relates to what's important to our business, this is how you are going to help us be a better company or help us deal with a really deep problem that we have that maybe is a historical problem. When people feel like they're working with a group of people towards a common goal that's a good goal, you kind of automatically get collaboration like you would on any good sports team. And I try to think about it that way when I'm working with my own team, and frankly when I'm working with teams of outside counsel as well.
And one thing that you're great at and do all the time is you're a coach, and along those lines, you have to divvy up responsibilities and make pretty clear who's doing what.
Sure, absolutely.
And it's important to do.
Agreed.
And one thing that I think could be really helpful from the client side is to be very clear, not just on a particular project, but overall with that relationship partner or partners, what you expect of us in terms of knowing what else is going on with your company at the firm, what level of communication, what level of investment you expect the person to make in your industry and your business, because I think that clients assume a level of sophistication in that regard that may not be there.
I think that's fair, and I think it's on me to make that clear. I agree with that.
So we started mostly talking about, at first, collaboration amongst partners within a firm. And Jennifer, you started to take us to the idea of firms collaborating with one another. What perspectives do you have on the way collaboration is evolving? Sandra, maybe you can talk for a moment about some of the trends you see in litigation where there are different kinds of collaborations happening between different parties.
Well, sure. Well, there are lots of different collaboration. As Jen just alluded to, she's had a number of matters, with all her various, in all her various general counsel positions. But one in particular that comes to mind is there was an environmental matter, and so you had a firm doing environmental work for 10 years, but then needed to layer onto that, litigation counsel. So that they don't supplant by any stretch, but it's obviously extremely important for them to be working together. The nature of what we all do, everybody on the stage, it's so complex now. It's a rare time anymore that you're just dealing with one firm. It really is rare, and it's very very important to have, whether it's the weekly calls, to that ensure that people are communicating. And if you don't end up needing them, you don't end up needing them, but having them as a construct, really smart thing to do. Whether it's, there's collaboration, again, between the firms, there's collaboration with the clients that I think has really had to increase tremendously, because picking up on what you were saying before, Jen, beyond all of that, beyond that, you need to be involved, as you clearly do, in what's going on in that particular matter for the knowledge of that particular matter. There's all sorts of things at the company that that are going on that your lawyers may not. And so we have to run everything by you. You may not end up looking at everything, but you have to know everything that's going on, because it could ring a bell on some other matter.
That's totally right.
right?
I
And
also think one thing that we're really focused on is this notion of efficiency, which I said at the beginning. So one thing we spend a lot of time on now is, are there pieces of the work, let's think about litigation where this hasn't so traditionally been the case, are there pieces of the work that we can more productively do in-house? And really good firms will partner with you and say, we're willing to let you have your in-house lawyers do the document review and live by their results. They'll get it right, they'll get it wrong, and we kind of stack hands together as a team and say, okay, the in-house lawyers are going to do the document review and we're going to live with the results of that. I would tell you, many, many years ago, there were not many law firms who were willing to sign on for that. They said, no, if you want us to stand behind the work, we want our people to do the work. And I understand that to a degree, but now I think that there's a little bit of the blurring of the lines in some matters. Even on M&A, we talked about this in preparing for the panel. Sometimes on M&A, if there's a supply agreement that's going along with the M&A deal, the in-house lawyers will do that working with the outside counsel. So I do think the lines are blurring between inside and outside. And I think every time, what is the most efficient resource I can put on this, quite frankly, at the lowest and most appropriate cost for the work. I'm not going to try to nickel and dime something that's really important. But if I have a resource that can get something done productively, maybe even better if it's someone inside because they know the business better, I'm going to work with the firm and say, can I put my resource on that? And we'll save your resource for the things that we really need your resource for. And every good law firm, in fact, all three of these law firms are willing to have those discussions with every client.
I mean, I think we have to replicate our clients. I mean, for the longest time, law firms, I think particularly to women, sort of felt like Masonic cults. I mean, they were, somewhat closed, and they were very hierarchical, and it's a job for life, and often, and those are all, some of those are all, wonderful traits. But our clients are fluid. They are existing in project by project bases. Enormous corporations have huge classes of international citizens, people who sort of pick where they want to live with their families or want to live on the weekends, and they are on the plane every day. And they're 3 months they're in Africa, 2 months later they're in Brazil. Those kinds of clients want you to be fluid as well. They don't want you to say my way or the highway, and we have these 5 people, and here's the guy at the top, and it kind of goes down like this. That might work for a certain piece of litigation or a certain deal, but it doesn't work for everything. And again, my view is if you can't become fluid, and I think probably flatter and more specialized, one-off, custom solution, the firms just don't make it through this century.
Right, and I think becoming the trusted advisor to the client is the goal. And it's been long thought that firms like ours can only do the biggest deals because we're expensive. But if you are willing to partner with the clients and allow the clients to do more or use lower cost providers for certain aspects, then you can get more work because you can do the smaller deals at an efficient price. And that's all you want is a good outcome with a lower price. And if you can figure out different ways to share the work with other, whether it's the client itself or other lawyers, you could get a win-win.
So it's interesting because the inefficiency of collaboration is often cited as one of the barriers why lawyers don't do more of it. Because it can be time consuming and clients aren't willing to pay for coordination costs and so on. But at the same time, if you think quite creatively about how you're collaborating and with whom you're collaborating, you're saying you can actually get more value out of it.
And I have something going on right now where I have multiple law firms participating on something, and I said it's really important that we all get together on this call every week, and it's many, many lawyers on the call. And I said, it's going to be really important for everybody who's on this team, who's playing on our baseball team, to hear what we have to say on this call. I'm willing to pay for one of you from each law firm. And I think you should bring your whole team. You don't have to bring your whole team. I'm only going to pay for one. And what's happening is everybody's bringing their whole team because their whole team wants to hear what's going on, but I'm paying for one. Most law firms will do that for you on a weekly coordination call. And that's, I think, a reasonable position for me to take. And if they didn't think so, they would tell me. And maybe we'd accommodate a little bit. But most firms are willing to have that kind of conversation. And I deeply believe that all those people on that team will do better in each of their tasks because they understand the whole of what we're trying to accomplish. Because every task happens in a context. Every issue happens in a context. If you don't have the context, you might do fine, but you won't have the context. And I think that matters.
Are you hearing more of these requests from your clients?
Oh, yeah. And you know, there's on the law firm side, there's a lot of ways to accommodate that as well. I mean, we're doing every alternative fee structure, you know, known to man now. And there's not a day that 5 litigation funders don't call us and ask us if we want to. And it used to be only on the plaintiff side. Our firm does plaintiff and defense work, and I'm now hearing from funders who want us to help us figure out how to help our clients on the defense side. So I think the era of just doing it one way on the hourly basis, which, by the way, is just as imprisoning, I think, for outside lawyers as inside.
Agree with that.
In so many ways, it's an incentive if you're not busy enough for you to overbill. It's hard to budget sometimes. Litigation, I'm sure this is true of deals as well, but I always think of litigation cases we get sometimes are in such disarray, it's really hard to predict what the fees will be. And I much prefer to have risk sharing with the client, because then we're really all on the same team. So I think that you want to get to a point where no one cares on either side how many people on that call, but sort of the more the better, as long as the call is efficiently run.
And that actually is a whole new area, well, not new, but certainly wasn't here 25 years ago, of part of the collaboration between client and outside firm is the whole fees, from the beginning of, what is the structure we're going to put in place through to the end on if you're over blank amount of money from what you have predicted you're going to spend in any given month, you have to tell the client, right? That really has to be a collaborative effort as well. You have to constantly tell your client and teach your associates this issue. Where are you? What are you spending? What do they think? Inform them, because if you send the general counsel a bill that's $2 million over, I don't care what kind of job you did, your firm is history. So that's just a huge part of collaboration that is new to me anyway, and that it didn't exist 28 years ago when I started. And that's just a big part.
So we will reserve a few minutes at the end for questions. So start to think about whether you've got any burning questions you really want to ask the esteemed panel. But I promised that we would get to this this question of the diversity. Is it a coincidence that it's an all-women's panel talking about collaboration?
I think it was just our network.
Yeah. We asked ourselves that, and I certainly have seen examples of both men and women collaborating well. So I wouldn't go so far as to say women collaborate better than men. But I do think that it might not be a total coincidence that you have a panel of women talking about collaboration, meaning it's an interesting subject to talk about in the context of a law firm environment, and perhaps there are more examples of women doing it in law firms than maybe men. I don't know whether I want to go that far, but we did sort of surmise ourselves as we were getting ready for the panel that maybe there is something to the fact that it turned out to be all women, but I don't know what the rest of you think. But that was sort of my view, which was not quite conclusive, obviously.
Or at least not on the record.
Yeah, indeed.
Right. That too.
Questions?
I have a question.
Here comes the mic.
All three of the law firms represented here are top of the food chain with excellent loyal client relationships. And what advice would you give to management of a firm and sort of more in the middle of the pack that needs to deploy significant resources every day and highly motivate partners to go out and get business to keep feeding the machine, or basically get utilization rates up?
I think it is about culture and what incentives are in place to reward the people going out to get the work, as well as the team of people who are doing the work. And so I don't think there's any easy answer to that question, but thinking creatively about how to get those partners to do the right thing. Some of it relates to collaboration with the client and not being afraid to have the conversation. And maybe you're not striving for things out of reach, but finding a sweeter spot in the middle where you could add a lot of value at a really efficient cost, and partner with either in-house or fill a slot in a deal or in a case that you're not trying to compete with us necessarily, but just be part of the team.
How about on the compensation within the firm issue?
I think it's where I started, and my firm is the youngest of the three. Our founders are still alive, and it seems to me that I'm a fan of lockstep. We don't have it, but I think it can work very well if the culture's been in existence for some time. For us, it was never an option because we kind of went from being at zero to getting into a higher league. And for us, a lot of it was just being completely open to the clients. We took on business that we did not think that we necessarily our clients would have been interested in us taking it on. It was at maybe a middle level or something that was appropriate for a different kind of fee structure. I think also just showing people in the firm that there are various roads to success. Not everyone has to be a business developer. Some people can just be profoundly great craftspeople. Some people can be innovative thinkers. I just think that there has to be a fluid compensation system where the factors are not, you brought in a $100,000 case and you get to chop it up three ways. As I said when we started, I really think that's the way to have people be like this, and you can't survive that way.
I agree. I think you really have to value all the participants in the delivery of the product to the client. And so clearly the Rainmaker is the notorious one who gets the biggest pot of gold. But unless you're compensating those people who are actually delivering the great work, what's the incentive to do the work?
And I think, Heidi, you have in some of your work, one of your first factors that you cite, you call it the no jerk rule. Is that what you call it? We have other words for that.
I was going to say, in polite companies, the no jerk rule, yes.
But I think that's also an issue, and sometimes when the word notorious gets in the same word with Rainmaker, you got to teach people to play well together from the very top. So,
other questions, please.
I have what I hope is a quick question. It might be particularly for Jennifer. Are there any metrics, any kind of measurements that you have in your budget and your team that help you assess whether collaboration is working or not?
Yeah, I think there are a couple things that I would say that we pay attention to. Certainly, we do a big scrutiny of any set of bills that come in. So we certainly do look at sort of how it is that the firms that we work with, whether it's multiple firms or a single firm, are in fact just doing the work. And you can actually, if you spend a lot of time with law firm bills, if you're a general counsel, you and your team spend a fair bit of time with law firm bills, you can get a sense just by looking at the bill for how and where the collaboration is happening and whether you think it's productive. You may be right, you may be wrong, but you can have a conversation about it. So one thing I would say is there's like a wealth of data in how law firms keep track of what they do. That is a lot of metrics that can help you start to see, is collaboration working within the firm? Within my own team, it kind of comes down to really looking at how I'm growing the skills within my team. So you can tell when collaboration's working, both from sort of employee engagement type surveys where you're looking at like, are my people happy to be working on my team? But then separately, are they growing their skills? People who are constantly challenged to do interesting work and are happy in what they're doing are probably in a collaborative environment. That's not to say there aren't some people who are just pure play specialists. That's all they want to be, and they're very happy just being the pure play specialist. So, there certainly are some outliers, but I would say any general counsel should be spending a fair bit of time with law firm bills because you can actually see in the bills where the collaboration is happening, and then you can judge that based on what's happening in the case or in the matter to see whether you think that's effective collaboration.